Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel, My Father's House. My name is Lily Carter. I am 26 years old, and I have spent most of my life waiting for 3 words that never came. I love you. My father never said them, not once. Not on my birthdays, not when I graduated, not when I cried, not when I left home. Not ever. His name is Robert Carter. Everyone calls him Bob. He's a tall man, 6'2", with gray at his temples and large, rough hands that are better at fixing engines than holding his daughter. He grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, the son of a coal miner who also never said those words. He moved to Nashville when he was 22, married my mom, and worked 30 years at an auto repair shop he eventually bought and made his own. He was not a bad man. I want to be clear about that from the beginning because this story is not about a villain. My father paid the bills, he fixed our cars, he showed up to my school plays, always in the back row, always leaving a little early. He made sure there was food in the house. He did not drink, he did not hit, he did not leave. He just never said it. And in a child's heart, silence can be as loud as any word. I grew up in a 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood in Nashville. My mom, Sandra, was the warm one, the hugger, the baker, the one who wrote little notes in my lunchbox and said, "I love you" so easily it sounded like breathing. My younger brother, Cole, was loud and funny and didn't seem to notice or care about our father's emotional distance. Or maybe he noticed and handled it differently. Boys often do. But I noticed. I noticed every time my dad patted Cole on the back, but only nodded at me. Every time he talked more easily with the neighbor's son than with his own daughter. Every time I said something important and he responded with a grunt or a shrug or just silence. I told myself it didn't matter. Children are very good at telling themselves things that aren't true. I was 7 years old the first time I really understood that something was different about my family. My best friend at the time was a girl named Cassie. She lived 3 houses down. One afternoon, we were playing in her backyard when her dad came home from work. He was still in his work clothes, a blue collared shirt, khaki pants. He walked through the back gate, saw Cassie, and picked her up and swung her around like she was still a toddler, even though she was 7. "There's my girl," he said, and Cassie laughed, that kind of full-body laugh that kids do when they feel completely safe. I watched from across the yard. I felt something I didn't have a word for yet, something between longing and confusion, like watching someone eat your favorite food through a window. That evening at dinner, I looked at my dad across the table. He was reading the newspaper. He always read the newspaper at dinner, which my mom quietly hated but never said anything about. I wanted to say something. I wasn't sure what. I just wanted him to look up. He didn't look up. I went to bed that night and lay in the dark and thought, does my dad love me? I was 7 years old. That question should not live in a 7-year-old's mind. But it did. And it stayed there for a very long time. As I got older, I looked for evidence, not of cruelty, there was none, but of love, the kind of love that speaks. I watched for it carefully, the way you watch for a rare bird in a tree, patient, hopeful, not wanting to miss it if it came. Sometimes I thought I saw it, the way he checked my car tires for a long drive without being asked, the way he sat in the hospital waiting room for 4 hours when I had my appendix out at 15, even though he didn't come into the room, the way he fixed my bicycle so quietly and perfectly one morning that I didn't even notice until I went to ride it. Acts, always acts, never words. And I kept asking myself, is that enough? Should that be enough? I spent most of my teenage years trying to earn my father's words. I became an excellent student, straight A's from 7th grade through senior year. I thought, if I'm impressive enough, he will say it. He didn't. He looked at my report cards the way he looked at a correctly balanced checkbook, with quiet satisfaction, nothing more. I joined the debate team. I won 2nd place at the state competition my junior year. My mom cried happy tears in the audience. My dad stood and clapped with everyone else. On the drive home, he said, "Good job," 2 words, short and clean like a receipt. I played softball for 3 years, even though I did not love softball. My dad understood sports. I thought if I played sports, maybe we would have a language in common. We didn't. He came to some of my games. He watched with his arms crossed. He drove me home afterward and talked about traffic. I realize now, looking back, that I was doing something very human and very painful. I was changing myself to fit someone else's love. I was becoming whoever I thought he needed me to be so that he would finally open his mouth and say the thing. It never worked, because the truth is, it was never about me. His silence was not a grade I could study for. It was not a performance I could perfect. It was his. It belonged to him and to his father before him and to a long line of men who were taught that love was something you showed by providing, not by speaking. I didn't know that then. I just felt like I kept failing a test I didn't understand. The turning point came the summer before I left for college. I had been accepted to Vanderbilt University, a big deal in our family, a school my parents had never attended, the kind of acceptance letter that made my mom frame it and hang it on the wall. I was nervous and excited and terrified all at once. One evening in July, I was sitting on the back porch alone. The Tennessee summer was thick with heat and fireflies and the sound of crickets. My dad came out. He sat in the other chair. We were quiet together for a while, which was normal. Silence was our most common language. Then I said, I don't know why I said it, maybe because I was leaving soon and felt brave in the way that people feel brave when an ending is near. Dad, do you love me? The words hung in the hot summer air. My dad looked at me. Then he looked away, at the backyard, at the old oak tree, at something far away that I couldn't see. He said, Of course I do. Don't ask stupid questions. And he went back inside. I sat on that porch alone for a long time. The fireflies kept blinking in the dark. The crickets kept singing. The world kept going. I felt something close inside me that night, not dramatically, not like a door slamming, more like a window being quietly shut and latched. I decided, sitting there, that I would stop waiting. I would stop looking for something he was not able to give. I would stop measuring my worth in his words. I told myself that. I believed it a little, but the heart does not always listen to what the mind decides. I left for Vanderbilt in late August. My mom packed my car with bedding and towels and a small cactus she bought at Trader Joe's because she said it was hard to kill just like you. She cried in the parking lot of my dorm. Her hands held my face in both hands and said, I love you so much, Lily. Call me every Sunday. My dad carried 2 heavy boxes up 3 flights of stairs without complaining. He set them down in my dorm room, looked around at the small space, and said, The locks on these doors look cheap. I'll bring a better one next time I visit. That was his goodbye. I watched my parents drive away from my dorm window. My mom's hand waved from the passenger side until the car turned the corner. My dad's hand stayed on the wheel. College was both wonderful and hard in ways I hadn't expected. I made friends, I loved my classes, I was studying psychology, which my dad thought was a waste of a good education, but my mom thought was perfect for me. I joined a whiting club, I went to football games and stayed up too late and ate dining hall food that was never quite right. But I also carried something with me to college that I hadn't planned to pack. A question, a hunger, an emptiness shaped exactly like 3 missing words. I noticed it most in relationships. I was drawn to people who were emotionally unavailable, friends who ran hot and cold, a boyfriend named Derek who never quite showed up the way I needed. I kept choosing people who made me work for their love because working for love was the only kind I knew. I didn't understand this about myself then. I only understood it later when someone helped me look. Part 6. The Patterns I Carried. I graduated from Vanderbilt at 22 with a degree in psychology and a minor in English. I moved to Chicago for a job at a nonprofit that worked with at-risk youth. I loved the work. I was good at it. I could sit with a struggling teenager and make them feel heard in a way that felt natural and true. Looking back, I understand why. I had been a struggling teenager who needed someone to make her feel heard. I knew exactly what that felt like from the inside. But my personal life was a different story. After Derek, there was Marcus, charming, funny, and completely unable to say how he felt about anything. After Marcus, there was James, kind but distant, the kind of man who showed love by doing things but never by saying things. Sound familiar? I kept choosing men who reminded me of my father. Not consciously. I didn't sit down and think, I want someone who won't say I love you. But somewhere in the deep, quiet parts of me, I was drawn to the familiar, even when the familiar hurt. My friend Nina, sharp, honest, the kind of friend who loves you enough to say the hard thing, finally said it to me one night over dinner in our favorite Chicago restaurant. Lily, every guy you date is emotionally unavailable. Do you notice that? I said, I just have bad luck. Nina looked at me with patient, knowing eyes. It's not luck, it's a pattern, and patterns come from somewhere. I drove home that night and sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, not crying, just sitting, knowing she was right and not yet ready to do anything about it. Part 7. Dr. Anita. 6 months after that dinner with Nina, I made an appointment with a therapist. Her name was Dr. Anita Reeves. She had an office on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Chicago with a window that looked out at Lake Michigan. She was a black woman in her 50s with natural gray locks and reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She was calm in the way that very wise people are calm, not because nothing bothered her, but because she had learned what to do with being bothered. The first session, she asked me why I had come. I said, I keep choosing the wrong people, and I think it has something to do with my dad. She nodded slowly. She didn't look surprised. She asked me to tell her about my father. So I did. I told her all of it. The newspaper at dinner, the back row of school plays, Cassie's dad swinging her around in the backyard, the porch in July. Don't ask stupid questions. I told her about the report cards and the softball games and the debate trophy and the 4 hours in the hospital waiting room and all the silent acts of a man who could not speak his love. When I finished, Dr. Reeves was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What did you feel when your father said, 'Don't ask stupid questions'?" I thought about it. Really thought. Not the quick surface answer, but the real one. I said, like I was asking for too much. Like wanting to be loved out loud was embarrassing. Like I was the problem. Do you still feel that way? That wanting to be loved out loud makes you... Part 6. The patterns I carried. I graduated from Vanderbilt at 22 with a degree in psychology and a minor in English. I moved to Chicago for a job at a nonprofit that worked with at-risk youth. I loved the work. I was good at it. I could sit with a struggling teenager and make them feel heard in a way that felt natural and true. Looking back, I understand why. I had been a struggling teenager who needed someone to make her feel heard. I knew exactly what that felt like from the inside. But my personal life was a different story. After Derek, there was Marcus, charming, funny, and completely unable to say how he felt about anything. After Marcus, there was James, kind but distant, the kind of man who showed love by doing things but never by saying things. Sound familiar? I kept choosing men who reminded me of my father. Not consciously. I didn't sit down and think, I want someone who won't say I love you. But somewhere in the deep, quiet parts of me, I was drawn to the familiar, even when the familiar hurt. My friend Nina, sharp, honest, the kind of friend who loves you enough to say the hard thing, finally said it to me one night over dinner in our favorite Chicago restaurant. Lily, every guy you date is emotionally unavailable. Do you notice that? I said, I just have bad luck. Nina looked at me with patient, knowing eyes. It's not luck, it's a pattern, and patterns come from somewhere. I drove home that night and sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, not crying, just sitting, knowing she was right and not yet ready to do anything about it. Part 7. Dr. Anita. 6 months after that dinner with Nina, I made an appointment with a therapist. Her name was Dr. Anita Reeves. She had an office on the 14th floor of a building in downtown Chicago with a window that looked out at Lake Michigan. She was a black woman in her 50s with natural gray locks and reading glasses on a beaded chain around her neck. She was calm in the way that very wise people are calm, not because nothing bothered her, but because she had learned what to do with being bothered. The first session, she asked me why I had come. I said, I keep choosing the wrong people, and I think it has something to do with my dad. She nodded slowly. She didn't look surprised. She asked me to tell her about my father. So I did. I told her all of it. The newspaper at dinner, the back row of school plays, Cassie's dad swinging her around in the backyard, the porch in July. Don't ask stupid questions. I told her about the report cards and the softball games and the debate trophy and the 4 hours in the hospital waiting room and all the silent acts of a man who could not speak his love. When I finished, Dr. Reeves was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What did you feel when your father said, 'Don't ask stupid questions'?" I thought about it. Really thought. Not the quick surface answer, but the real one. I said, like I was asking for too much. Like wanting to be loved out loud was embarrassing. Like I was the problem. Do you still feel that way? That wanting to be loved out loud makes you the problem? I opened my mouth to say no. Then I closed it because the honest answer was yes. I still felt that way. In every relationship, in every friendship, every time I needed something from anyone, I felt like the need itself was the problem. Like I was too much. That, said Dr. Reeves quietly, is what we are going to work on. Part 8, What Therapy Taught Me. I saw Dr. Reeves every 2 weeks for almost 2 years. It was the hardest and most important thing I have ever done. She taught me things that no class, no book, no well-meaning friend had ever been able to teach me. Not because the ideas were complicated, many of them were simple, but because she helped me feel them, not just understand them. And feeling is a different thing entirely from understanding. She taught me that children who grow up without emotional validation, without being told they are loved, seen, and valued, often grow up believing the silence was their fault. They believe they were not lovable enough, not good enough, not worthy enough to unlock the words. And so they spend their adult lives trying to unlock it from other people, choosing partners who withhold, working harder and harder for approval that never comes. She taught me that my father's silence was not a verdict on my worth. It was a wound in him, old and unexamined, that he carried from his own father, who carried it from his. Silence passing down through generations like an inheritance nobody asked for. She taught me that understanding this, really understanding it, would not make the hurt disappear, but it would change the hurt. It would move it from something that lived in the center of me to something that lived at the edge, something I could see clearly instead of something that quietly ran everything. One afternoon, about 8 months into our sessions, she asked, "Lily, if your father came to you today and said, 'I love you,' what would you feel?" I thought about it for a long time. Then I said, "Relief," and also sadness because of all the years it didn't come. Both of those things can be true at the same time. That's called complexity, and it's okay. Part 9, The Letter I Never Sent. About a year into therapy, Dr. Reeves gave me an exercise. She asked me to write my father a letter. Not to send, just to write. To say everything I had never been able to say out loud, everything I had folded up small and stored somewhere quiet for 20 years. I sat at my kitchen table on a Sunday morning with coffee and a yellow legal pad, and I wrote for 3 hours. This is part of what I wrote. Lily's letter. Dad, I have been waiting my whole life for you to say you love me. I don't think you know that. I don't think you know how much that waiting has taken up inside me, how many decisions it shaped, how many people it led me to, how many nights I lay awake wondering what was wrong with me that made it so hard for you to say. I know now that nothing was wrong with me. I know that your silence came from somewhere before me, from your father, and probably his father before that. I know you showed love in the ways you knew how: the car tires, the hospital waiting room, the bicycle. I see those things now. I didn't always. But I need you to know something, Dad. Words matter, not instead of actions, alongside them. A child needs to hear it, not once, often, the way they need food and water and sleep. It is not extra. It is not weakness. It is necessary. I am not writing this to blame you. I am writing this because I love you, and because somewhere in me there is still a 7-year-old girl watching Cassie's dad swing her around in the backyard, feeling something she didn't have a word for yet. I have a word for it now. It's called longing, and it deserved to be answered. Your daughter, Lily. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it and put it in the back of my journal. I did not send it, not yet, but something about writing it made the weight a little lighter, like putting a heavy bag down for a moment, even if you know you have to pick it up again. Part 10. The phone call. My father called me on a Wednesday evening in October. This was unusual. My father did not call. My mother called and sometimes handed him the phone at the end for a brief, businesslike exchange. But this time, he called himself. I almost didn't answer. I was tired from work. I had leftover pasta on the stove. I saw his name on the screen and felt the familiar mix of feelings: the old hope, the old guard going up, the complicated love. I answered, "Hey, Dad." "Hey." A pause. "How are you doing?" We talked for a few minutes about nothing important: my job, his shop, the weather in Chicago versus Nashville. Normal surface conversation, the kind we had always been good at. Then he said something that stopped me completely. "Your mom told me you've been seeing a therapist for a while now." I was quiet. My mom had told him. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. "Yeah," I said carefully. "I have been. Is it helping?" "Yeah, Dad, it really is." Another pause. Longer this time. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. I could picture him sitting in his recliner in the living room, probably in his work clothes still, the TV muted in the background. Then he said, I don't think I was always the easiest person to grow up with. As a dad, I sat very still on my couch. I did not say anything. I was afraid if I spoke, whatever was coming next might stop. "I'm working on some things." 3 sentences, short and imperfect and clearly difficult for him, but real. I said, "I know, Dad. Me too." Part 11. Sitting across from him. 3 weeks after that phone call, I drove to Nashville for Thanksgiving. The house was the same smell of my mom's cooking, same creaky third stair, same family photos lining the hallway. Cole was there with his girlfriend. My mom had cooked for 2 days. The table was full. My dad sat at the head of the table. He looked older than I remembered, more gray, a little slower. Time had done what time does. We ate. We talked. It was mostly the same as always. My mom carrying most of the conversation, Cole making everyone laugh, my dad eating quietly and occasionally nodding or adding a short sentence. But I looked at him differently this time, not with the old hunger, "Say it, please say it, why won't you say it?" but with something newer and quieter, something that Dr. Reeves might have called compassion. I saw a man who had never been taught how, a man who had grown up in a house where love was silent too, where you showed what you felt by working and providing and showing up, and where asking for more than that would have been called weakness. I saw the weight of that, the loneliness of it, because a man who cannot say he loves his daughter cannot fully say it to anyone. That silence costs him too. After dinner, while my mom and Cole's girlfriend washed dishes and Cole watched football, my dad and I ended up on the back porch. Same porch, different October than the one 11 years ago, cooler now. The old oak tree had lost its leaves. We sat in the same chairs. We were quiet for a while. Then I said, calmly and simply, "I'm glad I came home, Dad." He looked at me. Then he nodded slowly. "Me too," he said. 2 words, but different from all the other two-word answers. These felt like he meant them all the way down. Part 12, what he said instead. My father never said the exact words, not at Thanksgiving, not at Christmas, not on my 26th birthday when he called and actually sang, badly and briefly, happy birthday, which was so surprising that I had to press my phone against my chest so he wouldn't hear me laughing and crying at the same time. He never said, I love you, Lily. But he started saying other things, small things, new things. He started ending phone calls with, take care of yourself, which sounds ordinary, but wasn't, not from him. From him, it meant, you matter to me. I don't want anything bad to happen to you. He sent me a voicemail once, just once, that lasted 47 seconds. He talked about a bird he had seen at the feeder my mom kept by the kitchen window, a red-tailed hawk, which was unusual for their neighborhood. He described it carefully, the color of its wings, the way it sat perfectly still. He ended the voicemail by saying, thought you'd appreciate that. You always liked birds. I did always like birds. He remembered that. He thought of me when he saw something beautiful. He picked up the phone. He described it. That is love, expressed imperfectly in a language that took him 60 years to start learning, but love. I saved that voicemail. I have listened to it many times, not because it is what I always wanted, it isn't, but because it is real. It is his. And real, imperfect love, I have learned, is worth more than perfect love that doesn't exist. Part 13. The Long Road. Healing from a childhood wound is not a straight line. I want to say that clearly, because stories like mine can make it sound like therapy and a phone call and a Thanksgiving porch conversation fix everything. They don't. There were still hard days, still moments when I was in a relationship and felt the old patterns pulling at me, the urge to shrink, to need less, to make myself smaller so that someone else would stay. Still moments when my father said something clumsy or absent-minded and I felt the old ache return, right in the center of my chest, familiar as an old scar. But something had fundamentally changed. I had changed. Not all at once, slowly, the way trees grow, too slow to see day to day, but real when you measure year against year. I started choosing differently, in friendships, in love, in the workplace. I started choosing people who could show up, not perfectly, but genuinely. People who could say the hard thing. People who didn't make me work endlessly for basic warmth. I met a man named Samuel at a work conference in Denver. He was a social worker from Atlanta, quiet in a thoughtful way, not a wounded way. On our third date, completely without drama, he said, I really like spending time with you. And instead of the usual panic, too much, too soon, don't trust it, wait for the other shoe to drop, I felt something simpler. I felt glad. That was new. That was healing. Part 14. What I know now. I am 26 years old. I have been in therapy for 2 years, and I will probably keep going. I have a job I find meaningful. I have Nina, who still loves me enough to say the hard thing. I have Samuel, who says the good thing, too. I have my mom, who has never stopped saying I love you easily and often, and who I now understand was carrying her own weight in a house of silence. And I have my father, Robert Carter, Bob, who sang happy birthday badly on the phone and left a 47-second voicemail about a hawk, and now ends every phone call with take care of yourself, and means it all the way down. Here is what I know now that I did not know at 7 or 12 or 19. A parent's inability to express love is not a measurement of your lovability. It is a measurement of their wound. You did not cause it. You cannot fix it. You cannot earn your way around it with good grades or softball games or perfect behavior. It lives in them, not in you. And yet, and this is the part that took me the longest to understand, carrying that knowledge does not make the hurt disappear. You are allowed to grieve what you didn't get. You are allowed to wish it had been different. Forgiving your parent does not mean pretending the absence didn't cost you anything. It cost you. Name that cost honestly. And then, slowly, imperfectly, with help if you can get it, you build the love yourself. You choose people who can give it. You learn to receive it without flinching. You learn to give it freely, because the cycle of silence has to stop somewhere. Let it stop with you. You are not your parent's wound. You are yourself, whole and separate and worthy of being loved out loud. You always were. Part 15. Enough Love. Last spring, I went home to Nashville for my parents' 31st anniversary. My mom made dinner, the good plates, candles on the table. Cole came with his girlfriend, who is now his fiancé. Samuel came too, his first time meeting my family. I was nervous about that in ways that had nothing to do with Samuel and everything to do with me. Dinner was loud and warm. My mom loved Samuel immediately, which I had expected. Cole interrogated him about sports, which I had also expected. My dad shook his hand firmly at the door and said, "Good to meet you," which from my father is high praise. After dinner, while everyone else was in the living room, I found myself alone in the kitchen washing a few dishes. My dad came in to get a glass of water. He stood next to me at the sink for a moment. He said, "He seems like a good man." I said, "He is." My dad nodded. He filled his glass. He was about to go back to the living room. Then he stopped. He stood there with his back to me for just a second, and then he turned around halfway, not all the way, just halfway, and said quietly to somewhere between me and the wall, "I'm proud of you, Lily. The way you turned out. I'm proud of you." He went back to the living room before I could answer. I stood at the kitchen sink for a long moment. The water was still running. Outside the window, the backyard was dark. Somewhere out there was the old oak tree and the porch chairs and the memory of a July night and a question that got the wrong answer. I turned off the faucet. It was not, "I love you." It may never be exactly those words, and somewhere in me, the 7-year-old watching Cassie's dad still aches a little, still wishes it had come sooner, come more easily, come the way it came in other houses. But I have learned something about love that I didn't know for a long time. It does not always come in the shape you expected. Sometimes it comes in a 47-second voicemail about a hawk. Sometimes it comes in 2 words, "Take care," said every single week without fail. Sometimes it comes halfway turned around in a kitchen, directed at a space between a daughter and a wall. It is still love, imperfect and late and shaped by wounds and silence, but love. And I, finally, truly in my bones, am enough to receive it. Lesson of the story. A parent's inability to express love is not a measurement of your lovability. It is a measurement of their wound. You did not cause it. You cannot fix it. You cannot earn your way around it with good grades or softball games or perfect behavior. It lives in them, not in you. And yet, and this is the part that took me the longest to understand, carrying that knowledge does not make the hurt disappear. You are allowed to grieve what you didn't get. You are allowed to wish it had been different. Forgiving your parent does not mean pretending the absence didn't cost you anything. It cost you. Name that cost honestly. And then, slowly, imperfectly, with help if you can get it, you build the love yourself. You choose people who can give it. You learn to receive it without flinching. You learn to give it freely, because the cycle of silence has to stop somewhere. Let it stop with you. You are not your parents' wound. You are yourself, whole and separate and worthy of being loved out loud. You always were.